The college football experience, Florida Gators 2024 team preview episode on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network is brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. You can win up to 100 times the amount of money you enter with Underdog Fantasy Pick'em. Sign up today with the promo code TCESGPN to claim your special pick plus first time deposit offer up to $250 in bonus cash. And yes, they will have college football like they do every year. UnderdogFantasy.com, promo code TCESGPN. We're also brought to you by Rhythm. Get the best data-driven props and picks from Rhythm. Claim your free 7-day trial today by going to sportsgamblingpodcast.com/rhythm. That's sportsgamblingpodcast.com/rhythm. That's RITHMM.
This is Mike Leach, head football coach at Mississippi State, and you're listening to SGPN. Let it ride.
Experience. Gator. Florida Gators 2024 season preview episode. Look, I love doing these team previews. I love diving into each and every team's history and did they create Gatorade or not? It seems like half the NCAA says they have, but one's only called Gatorade. I don't know if that was a convenient thing or not, but I'm excited to talk Florida Gator football in 2024. It's a pivotal year in the Billy Napier era. YouTube.com/the college football experience. Hit that like and subscribe button because we're back at it. We've been doing this shit for a long time, 7-8 years now, breaking down every single team in college football with a solo podcast. Yes, if you are a fan of the Florida International Panthers, don't worry. We're going to have an hour dedicated to you. Just like, we don't an hour to Alabama, an hour to Utah State. So check it all out. We're going to break down all 134 this year because Kennesaw State's jumping 134 FBS teams. It'll be 136 next year with Delaware and Missouri State, but we got you covered. Also, if you like the FCS, check out the FCS college football experience. But yes, all of our podcasts come together as one, youtube.com/the college experience. And congratulations to the Florida Gators for just beating the Oklahoma State's Cowboys in the college baseball ranks in a very good game there. If you're wondering who the hell you're listening to, that's fair. My name is Colby Swinging Database Dan, aka Pick Dundee. That's not a pick. This is a pick.
He was raised in the land down under, where a man thinks on his feet, speaks with his fists, and lives by his wits.
When Dundee happened, he was a superstar.
I'm probably drinking too much and celebrating too much and not sleeping. Would have killed a normal man, but no, that's gone. The medical advice I got from that was like being hit by lightning. Pretend it never happened and get on with your life.
Pretend it never happened and get along with your life because I can pretend a lot of things never happened at the world's biggest cocktail party. Me and NC Nick have been there. Might have had a few alcoholic adult beverages. Love that game, and look, I'd like to see. The old ball coach is one guy that I hated in the '90s, but in hindsight, God damn it, was he great for college football? Oh, missed the old ball coach. There is a Spurrier Jr. out there. I met him with Mike Leach and Pullman. I met the ball coach too. I met the old ball coach in Pullman. So I like to think I'm a little more Florida Gator than you guys.
How was Spurrier in person? I'm curious.
He was cool. It was cool. Yeah, he seemed like a nice guy. I met him for 30 seconds and said, I'm a big fan. It wasn't like with Coach Leach, we actually got to meet Coach. Like we were talking, telling jokes, might've been some profanity involved with Coach Leach and old Pick Dundee here, but excited to talk. I like to think because of that connection, I'm a little more Gator than you guys.
I'm okay with you having that crown because I am not a Gator lover per se.
I've never hated Florida either, though. I don't think.
Oh, I did.
Patty C's more of a Bowden guy. He's a Bowden guy.
No, I hated Bowden too. I'm an equal opportunity hater. I don't know who was more hateable. I would say in hindsight, Bowden was more hateable than Spurrier, but it's close. It's close.
No, I agree. I think Bowden was more hateable.
Yes. Yeah. Spurrier, to me, I actually think, like I said, it was confusing because I ended up loving him more as I got older because, hey, no one yanked the quarterback like Steve Spurrier. It's like one drive. I don't care if you threw 5 touchdowns last week. One drive, you throw a pick, you're out.
Boom.
Right. And he's normally got a hilarious line. He's got a classic line about Tennessee. You can't spell Citrus Bowl without Tennessee. Right. I mean, Steve Spurrier makes football better, in my opinion. A lot of great lines. And anyway, I am joined by my co-host. You see him on the screen if you're watching on YouTube. Give it up for former JMU Duke defensive back, the burrito eating, sideline kiss stealing, wheeling and dealing, Patty C in the place to be.
Hi-oh, up.
Let's get it going. Look, Danny Werfel. Everyone's talking Tebow. What about Danny Werfel? What about Terry Dean? Kerwin Bell, Western Carolina, represent. Shout out to Weehawk. All right, Emmett Smith, Neil Anderson, Mark Duper. They got guys. Wilbur Marshall, one of my all-time favorites. Come on, this is Florida. They got guys. They always got guys. Oh, yeah. All right. We're also
guys in the recruiting ranks these years. I mean, they got guys still.
They got guys suing them too. And we're going to talk all about that. We are also joined by third man in the booth, the DFS god himself, and he has been to the world's largest cocktail party. He might not remember it either. Give it up for the rooftop IPA drinking, home brew making, Tobacco Road living, the free lock giving, former Herndon Basketball League MVP. Give it up for NC Nick in the place to be.
There we go. What's going on, guys?
I know we don't want to play this out of Florida, but it's your music.
I mean, at least it's not the Oklahoma State preview or the Texas preview.
That's true. I got to,
dude. If you have seen Bosworth's style in the '80s with the mullet and the jorts, I feel like he would have been a perfect fit for Florida.
No, he was like ahead of the time at Florida, and I do believe they played at the Orange Bowl against Miami, right, where he wore his NCAA communist. I think that I remember when he wore the headband that called the NCAA a bunch of communists.
Right. Yeah.
That was a T-shirt, wasn't it?
That was T-shirt. That's right. It was T-shirt. McMahon was the headband. Yeah, but I still stand by Brian Bosworth on that approach.
Let's not get derailed with Brian Bosworth stories again.
Well,
we're here to talk Florida Gator football.
Because I wear that shirt. I have one that a handmade communist T-shirt that I show off to my wife all the time in the house. She always says, what the hell are you wearing that for? And I go, I'm making a statement.
I was going to say, be careful around Southern California wearing that.
Yeah. Actually, no, you'll be right at home here in Venice.
Looking like Bosworth or wearing that shirt?
Wearing the commies T-shirt. Looking like Bosworth.
I feel like Muscle Beach does attract a little bit of Bosworth too. But
that's true.
Either way, guys, Florida Gators, let's talk about this for a second before I even show off these beautiful slides that I've been making behind the scenes. I just want to talk in general about Florida Gator football seasons. They fired Dan Mullen a year removed from an SEC championship berth. And in general, you could really say since Urban Meyer, things haven't been so smooth. And with the rise of Georgia, and now you're looking at kind of seeing the rise of Tennessee. I think Tennessee has one of the best NIL collectives, if not the best in the nation. Makes you wonder. And you could also say the rise of Kentucky, who's had their number lately. I know that's a horrible thing to say on this very podcast, but how about since Urban Meyer left in 2010? I mean, Mullen, it's crazy that he got fired, actually, when I think about this.
Well, especially who they hired to replace him. Like, if you're going to fire Dan Mullen, you better have like a surefire, top-notch coach that's coming to town who you've already had conversations with. No offense to Billy Napier. He did a fine job in his 4 years at Louisiana, but coaching Louisiana and coaching in the SEC is completely different.
Let me just prove my point, though, because Urban Meyer had 3 double-digit seasons in 6 years there in Gainesville. 3. Well, Mullen only had 4 years and he had 2 double-digit win seasons, and he got fired. Not even like, it's actually puzzling. He was 10-3 in year 1, 11-2 in year 2, then 8-4, and then 6-7, and they fired him before the end of the season. It's one of the more
3 New Year's 6 bowls in 4 years,
and they fired him before the end of the season in a way because they're like recruiting. He was like 11th in the country. He wasn't top 10, or he was like 14th. So I always was puzzled at that. And I find it hilarious now that it's like, if you listen to major publications other than us, because we are major, they say, well, recruiting, everyone's not focused on recruiting as much. It's all about the transfer portal. So Mullen was like ahead of the curve on this. And now he's, unemployed or coaching his kids in Georgia. I don't fucking know. But either way, what do you make of the Florida program and their crazy that like they've had crazy patient, or they've been very impatient about their hires, because even McElwain was 10-4 in year 1, 9-4 in year 2, and then horrible 4-7 season, fired. But if you threw out that season, if just called that one a tough season, he was 19-8 prior to that.
When you think about it, with Will Muschamp too, all of these guys start hot. 10. Will Muschamp 11-2 in his second year. McElwain 10-4 in his first year. Mullen 10-3 and then 11-2 in his first 2 years. So all 3 of their most recent hires have had 10-win seasons within the first 2 years of coaching. For whatever reason, they aren't able to sustain it, but maybe it's because they've been building the program, and that's why the new coach, is inheriting a somewhat full cupboard. So if they just would allow them to coach another year, I mean, you can't say that for sure, because each of those 3 coaches has had a downward trend over the course of their coaching tenure. Granted, they haven't been that long of coaching tenures, but what do you think is going on there?
I mean, I just think they need to have more patience. I think it's kind of silly to
well, I don't know. I mean, what if they go 4-8 this year? Do they need more patience? Do they hang on to Billy Napier?
Well, no. In this one, like Mullen had proven, he got Mississippi State to number 2 in the nation.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, so I mean, look, success is a great thing, right? But success breeds crazy expectations.
Yeah.
And it's hard for teams to live up to those expectations every year, especially when you're going through coaching changes, because there's only so many excellent top tier college football coaches. There's probably a lot more like pretty good college football coaches, but there's only a handful of guys who are the elite of the elite coaches.
Well, one of the things Napier, LSU never wanted Napier, and I thought that was crazy because LSU had an open vacancy. They had fired Orgeron. They never even looked into Billy Napier. I thought that was interesting because he was there in Lafayette, Louisiana.
Yeah, I mean, I felt like the Napier hire was kind of just like reactive on Florida's part. I don't think they had him like dead to rights in their crosshairs prior to like the hiring season. I think they were just like, all right, we need a new coach because Mullen's gone, and who's out there?
Well, no, they fired Mullen early though. Like they didn't even finish the season with him. Yeah. So to me,
what's crazy about that too? Mullen, his first 3 seasons, which we just mentioned, he was in the Peach Bowl, Orange Bowl, Cotton Bowl. They finished in the top 10
championship. He beat Georgia. He beat Kirby Smart.
They finished in the top 10 all 3 of his first 3 years, and he didn't make it through year 4. That is ridiculous expectations,
And that is why, to me, like, I don't give a shit that he was 12th in recruiting or something. I actually think that, look, you want to talk about, I've long lobbied that recruiting is overrated, and I know me and Patty have argued this, and I'll say this. It's certainly overrated between number 7 and number 12. I'll tell you that. Like, I understand some of the points, but I don't think there's a big difference between 12 and 8 because some fucking nerds in their underwear, to quote Rich Rodriguez, sitting at home in the basement, in their parents' basement in their underwear, ranked a guy, a 4-star or 5-star.
Wait, was that within the conference or within the nation?
I was going to say, I mean, according to 24/7 Sports, Napier's first 3 years.
Not Napier. I'm talking about Mullen.
But I'm about to say Napier's classes haven't been that much better. They've been 17th, 12th, and he actually just inked his best class 7th in the nation which
and
is
he's
still
being
fourth,
sued, and he's
fourth
being
in the
sued,
SEC.
and he's being sued. But that's what I'm saying, dude. It's
Those
all
are not
ridiculous.
bad recruiting classes.
No, they're not bad, but they're
No,
not
but
that
Mullins
much better
was not
than
bad
Mullen.
either. Go
I
to
know.
Mullins, yeah.
I know. It's ridiculous.
That's my point. Is like the main reason, the narrative that they pushed on firing Mullen was that he couldn't recruit at an upper tier level, which I just find fucking hilarious. Dak Prescott's in the NFL right now, still getting paid. You know what I mean? Like, get the fuck out of here with this shit.
I don't know that Prescott was an elite recruit. He was developed well.
But that's my point. Is you have Dan Mullen to develop the goddamn talent, and there's no big difference between 6, between 8. Between 14.
First off, you have to identify the talent, and then you have to develop the talent. And just because they're not a 5-star coming out of high school doesn't mean they're not very talented and they're not something that you can work with and mold into an NFL starting quarterback for a decade.
That's true, and he had done that with Florida before. You know, It's not like it was just at Mississippi State. Yeah, he has a long track record of developing quarterbacks into. No, I guess Tebow. I mean, the fact that Tebow even had a run in the NFL is probably a testament to Dan Mullen.
Won a playoff game.
Yeah,
Won a playoff game.
As a Steelers fan,
for me, it comes down to: do you want to win the offseason or the season? The season is more important to win than the offseason is, because the offseason really doesn't mean shit until they produce on the field.
Yeah.
Well, here's the thing. I agree with that, but traditionally, the teams that have won the season have also won the offseason. You haven't seen a national championship team with recruiting down in the mid-teens too often. Now, Michigan just did it, but they've been dominating the portal lately.
I was gonna say, what's Washington been? What's TCU been? I mean, lately I feel like
lately it's definitely changed. Recruiting doesn't mean
well, the portal matters, dude. We've talked. I mean, the portal is way more important than recruiting right now to me. Like way more. You can get veterans. I would agree with you that the portal is obviously a big difference maker, and it's showing up in the ways we just said. Like, you don't have to be an elite recruiting team anymore to make it deep into the playoffs. I mean, Florida State just went undefeated, and their whole goddamn team was Jordan Travis from Louisville, Keon Coleman from Michigan State, Jared Verse from Albany. You go literally the Fentrell Cypress from Virginia. You go one by one, every player in their goddamn starting lineup. They started a guy from Duke on the offensive line. They started a guy from Colorado on the offensive line. They started a guy from UTEP, Jonathan Byers. Yeah, are
so much different now with these unlimited transfers and the NIL that it does kind of greatly nullify the necessity for recruiting. I still think it's a good thing, and had this happened a few years back, then maybe or had Mullen been in today's environment, producing the recruiting rankings he had now. At the time, I can understand the legit concern if they're not recruiting to that level, but still, it kind of hurts. You'd like to have him back now.
Yeah, well, I can't when he was just 1 year removed from the SEC championship game. Like, they had to figure Nick Saban would retire soon. He was 1-1, or he was 1-1 or 1-2 against Kirby Smart, but like those games were close.
He was doing a fine job.
Foolish firing, in my opinion. I'm shocked he's not. Now, I know he loves broadcasting and being a part of College Football Live and everything, but I still wonder, if Arkansas fires Pork Pittman or something, do they call Dan? He should be a college football coach. You can't convince me otherwise.
100%.
But anyway, let's jump into this because Billy Napier. Let's talk a little bit about old Bill Napier. Bill Napier, he's on the hot seat. He's 11-14 in 2 years. Those recruiting rankings NC Nick pulled up. Should he be on the hot seat? Yes, because he's 3-12 against teams with a winning record. He's 6-10 versus SEC teams. I would not have a problem with them removing Billy Napier. Unlike Mullen, who had proven that. He's Napier's 0-2 against Florida State. He's 0-2 against Georgia, who both losses by more than 3 touchdowns. 0-2 versus LSU. 0-2 versus Kentucky. That one really you got to stick and send home. 2-0 against Beamer, but 1-1 against Tennessee and 1-1 against Vanderbilt. That's not gonna get you far. Billy Napier. I wonder, not only does he make it through the season, and look, I just did the Arkansas preview earlier today. Go listen to that. I'm terrified of these win totals on taking the over on any of these schools with a chance that the coach could be fired by the first bye week. Remember, everyone's got 2 bye weeks these days in college football starting this year. And I think if you're going to take the over, you got to be very, very sold on this team. Yeah. Because like I said, and nowadays more than ever, maybe, and this is maybe my Clint Eastwood get off my lawn, but I feel like when you start losing and a coach leaves, they fucking quit. You've seen a lot of these teams over the past, I'd say 5 years. When the coach gets fired, you see this thing go straight downhill. So you're doing a hell of a gamble if you're taking the over, because if Napier gets fired by week, I don't know, 4 or 5, that first bye week, which we'll talk about in a little bit, they might just pack it in from there and just lose every fucking game out. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know how you can feel optimistic about the future if that happens, but
here's one thing that might save his job. And I know we're going to get into like schedules and roster, but he did sign one of the 2 5-stars he signed this year was quarterback DJ Lagway. If Florida starts off slow, I could see them benching Graham Mertz and plugging in Lagway right away. And if Lagway looks decent, they might consider keeping Napier for a 4th year, because if they fire Napier, well, good chance Lagway's transferring out.
Yeah. And
Lagway is supremely athletic. I'm assuming, just taking a look at him. I haven't watched a ton of tape on him, but
he had Anthony Richardson, didn't he? He had Anthony Richardson. Was that Mullen? It was him, right? No.
Richardson was 2 years ago. Yeah, so he did have him. But look, I guess they weren't that good they were 7-6 2 years ago. Richardson looked really good.
6 and 7. 6 and 7.
Yeah. He's 11-14 in 2 years, you know.
Yeah, they need to show improvement from a record standpoint. Although if they somehow against the back end of that schedule have success, and that's probably the hardest second half of the schedule in the country this year, I think he needs to get it done in the first half of the schedule. I think you're right.
This is one where I do believe the hype that I think it might be the hardest schedule in the nation this year.
I agree. But before we look at this year, look at last year. So last year they go 5-7. They were 5-2 in mid-October. And at that point, you're thinking, okay, I mean, they had the big win at home against Tennessee, 29-16. Then they lose their last 5 games. And they just needed one more to get to bowl eligibility. But overall, let's look at the teams they lost to. They lost at Utah, at Kentucky, versus Georgia. The Arkansas game in overtime is the one bad loss. They lost at LSU, at Missouri, and Florida State. That's a whole lot of top 10, top 20 teams right there. But on the flip side, their only decent win was the Tennessee game.
Actually, yeah, that's what I was about to say. Is like, if you go back to the Utah game, Utah was starting their technically, I think their 4th string quarterback, right? They had so many opportunities to win that game with the 4th string quarterback starting and it was, just crazy. Too many men on the field, delay a game. There were so many penalties that it just says, and to me, this has been the problem under Napier is like, you look at the Charlotte game, they won 22-7. That was a closer game than that. Even that score says 15-point win. That was a little bit of a game, 3rd quarter. And to me, you go back to the first year. No, let me add in the South Carolina win from last season, 41-39. They probably should have lost that game if you go back and watch that game. But year 1, in his first game, Utah threw a pick in the end zone. I thought Utah was the better team. Utah botched that game. It was a little bit on Whittingham there. But then the South Florida game, there was a horrible South Florida team. They only beat by 3. To me, it's the games that he wins that are the red flags to me. It's the games that he wins that like, okay, maybe in November of his first year when they waxed South Carolina and beat A&M by 17, where I say, okay, but that was a 5-7 A&M team. I don't know. To me, it's against those mid majors. It's and when you watch them, they always fuck up. You know what I mean? Like, I always feel like it's never clean. And that is, to me, the bigger thing is the eye test of like watching those games. Even
are they a well-coached football team?
Yeah, they just seem like a shitty team to me.
The answer has been too often no. They have been well coached because they still have talent and they've had talent. And that's why Anthony Richardson gets drafted. That's why Ricky Pearsall gets drafted and others.
Yeah. And I will, and Hackney's talking about Florida lost to Vanderbilt only once since 89, and Napier, is one of the guys that his year one lost to Vandy. And he also brings up this, which I laugh at. ESPN dropped their power index. I want you to you can't quote ESPN it's a conflict of interest. ESPN's in bed with the SEC. So their power index rankings, in my opinion, from the start, burn them. You know what I mean? From the fucking start. We talked about this a few years ago when Stanford played 12 Power 5 games, and every single team every other team in all of, at the time, I think it was 131. Every other team played that the most. I think it was 10 Power 5s. And Stanford wasn't even in their top 10 hardest schedules. And I'm like, what the fuck are they talking about? I can see the slant. You know what I mean? And so don't buy into that. Don't buy into any of that. But Florida and Billy Napier, obviously it's a big year. And what is the most impressive record there out of those that I put on the screen, youtube.com/@thecollegeexperience? It's the South Carolina one, right? It's the only one, or maybe Tennessee 1-1. Nick?
None of them are impressive. I mean, you're Florida, and this is why Napier's on the hot seat. If you're 11-14 through two seasons at Florida, a team that's won national championships, not too long ago, that's why you're on the hot seat. None of those records are impressive.
And folks, Benedict Dantle, shout out to him in the chat. And by the way, we're going conference by conference this year, Benedict, not alphabetically. But one of the concerns I would say is, in general, Napier is being, not only does he have the situation with recruiting, and he's being sued by a former recruit where they promised $13 million. And right now the whole case is kind of pending Jaden Rashada, who's now currently a quarterback on Georgia's roster. But it's basically pending a text message that Billy Napier sent Jaden Rashada saying, hey, we're going to give you this money if you sign here. And to me, if they have that proof, which is their case, I don't think you would sue if you didn't have that text message to show.
I kind of feel sorry for Napier there, and this is all speculation, but he probably doesn't know. He was probably told by whoever runs the finances in their NIL program.
Yeah.
That I don't think he would go out on the limb and just throw a number out there. He was probably told that, yeah, we got this money for you, and he relayed that message. I'm assuming.
But if you know but one of the more,
if you're the dude making the promise to a kid, though, you better be sure it's backed up.
Well, you gonna go check bank accounts or something? You got to trust your NIL collective. I mean, you're just the head coach of the football team.
No. But to be fair, $13 million, no one was being anywhere closely paid to that number. It was a drastic number. You know what I mean? This is like it's
ridiculous.
When they're offering Schwarzenegger $50 million for Terminator 3, you're sitting there saying, really? You know what I mean? Like, you better make sure.
This was last year, right? It was.
It was
a year and a half ago or so.
Yeah, year and a half ago.
It was the very first year of NIL, if I'm not mistaken.
Didn't the Tennessee quarterback, Valle or whatever his name is?
Yes, he got some money
offer.
No, but he got $8 million over 4 years. And Rashada, that's what I'm saying. The Rashada one, I don't blame Jaden Rashada because he's a 17-year-old kid.
Yeah,
and you don't know the numbers. They toss out this number to you. You're going to take the bait, but I can guarantee you this: everyone in the college football world was kind of puzzled at that number. At the time he was going to go to Miami, and John Ruiz had him, and everyone's like, "What the fuck is this number that they're coming up?"
It was also the very first year, so nobody really knows. It's like everybody's this is the first time for everybody, so nobody really knows, where a 5-star quarterback is going to get and how much he's going to get.
Yeah, exactly. New King God says, y'all got to break down every game on the Florida schedule. You're goddamn right we are, brother. Let's go. All right, we're going to get there. We're going to go. Obviously, we're going to take a look at the offense, the defense, and that's just what, we do this for every single team, including if I'm judging by the photo. See, a Canes fan. He says, get to the Canes game.
Oh, well, you don't have to get very far.
Yeah.
It's, week 1, right?
Let's go. But first, let's talk about this offense from a year ago. 57th in scoring offense per game, points wise, 28.4 points per game. That's for 9th best in the SEC. They were 77th in rush offense, 149.8 yards per game. That was 8th best in the SEC. 40th in pass offense, which is 259.3 yards per game. 7th in the SEC. Spurrier's mad. The visor's off. It's on the ground. All right. 46th in total yards, 409.1 yards per game. Sixth best in the SEC. I mean, are you shocked by those numbers at all? I mean, they're still sixth best in yards. So
it's not miserable.
Yeah.
It's kind of middle of the road, slightly better than average in the SEC.
What were there 14 teams in the SEC last year? Is that right?
There were what? I'm sorry, Patty.
There were how many? 14 teams in the SEC last year?
Yeah.
So above average, but at Florida, you expect to be above average. Granted, the SEC is stacked. So maybe how far above average should you expect to be?
I didn't think Napier's offenses were that dynamic in the Sun Belt at Louisiana either.
They weren't. They were not. Let me tell you, watching those things week in, week out, I know you were watching them too, Nick. I thought that he caught lightning in a bottle in a way. Now, he did a good job recruiting.
For sure.
But Troy and South Alabama were really down those years. Troy, Neil Brown had gone to West Virginia. And they made a incorrect hire, which they since fired, and both those programs were down. And Sunbelt still to this day has divisions, and that ULM, Texas State were trash back then.
Yeah,
Arkansas State was about their best contender, and they weren't great. But to me, it was one of the weaker divisions in all of college football.
Yeah,
and he to me he was able to capitalize that. On that, and he cashed in. More power to him, but I needed to see more, and it certainly wasn't the offenses. It was more so the defenses at Louisiana that to me stood out to me.
Well, in the SEC East, a weak division.
That's
taking
gone.
Advantage
That's
of
gone
that.
though.
Well, you would think at the time of the hire, it's like, all right, he can beat up on a weak division in that conference. Maybe he can come over here and beat it. Now, obviously, Georgia isn't weak, but the rest of the division has been, but now that's gone. You're right.
I think it all starts at the quarterback position, and I think Graham Mertz, he didn't have an awful year last year. I mean, if you look at the numbers, 2,900 yards, 20 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, great touchdown interception ratio, but he's just kind of average.
Yeah,
and will he ever be anything more than just serviceable? That's the question. Can he make a leap here? Probably not. I think we've seen who he is. I think he's a solid college quarterback.
But you bought one of his NIL t-shirts, right? No.
At this point, I wish I could. It would be just for the irony.
That's right.
Shout out to New King God though, because he's hilarious. He's dead on right. But Rashada was promised more money to sign. And that's what I'm saying. If you follow this story, Florida basically lied to this kid, told him he was going to get this money, and then when it came time to this NIL guy to pay up, or the collective to pay up, they never got that money. But Napier apparently has text messages where he says, like, you're okay, you're getting you the money, and it never came. And that's the basis of the lawsuit. But
I mean, is the coach even really supposed to be involved with the NIL collectives?
Yes, I think so.
I mean, if you're recruiting a player and offer money, you have to be tied into that, right? And I mean, that's why it sucks to be a college coach these days.
And what did Nick Saban's wife say? These kids only care about money.
But that's not supposed to be like, I thought that had kind of explicitly been, stated that, hey, these kids are allowed to go seek their own financial, sources of income related to football.
Fucking NIL, that name, image, and likeness is complete bullshit.
It is,
but they're not out there signing autographs for a couple $100.
Yeah,
I understand that, but it's it's odd if that had been stated outwardly, and then you have the coach directly promising the money from the boosters.
Think
that's just pay for play.
I don't think the NCAA is even going to try on that. It is pay for play. It's dude. We're talking.
That's
about
what NIL is. I understand.
Not even NIL. We're talking SEC football. It's been pay for play. Fred Taylor stole $50,000 from Georgia back in the day. He's talked about this on a podcast. All right, Cam Newton's dad sitting over there, Dumb and Dumber, just blowing snot bubbles into fucking cash. Anyone that's this
Patrick
delusional,
Peterson.
That's what I'm saying. But I think one of the best things New King God's talking about, if you follow this story right now, is that John Ruiz had given, I think it was $150K or $100K to Jaden Rashada. And in the fine print of what he had signed, saying that if you're going to take him away from you have to pay him $150K, and Florida did. So somewhere within that is great gold for this rivalry in this first matchup, because Florida said, okay, let's give him the money. It just, and Joe Hackney brings up a great point here. They're 10th in the SEC for penalties per game. Speaks to coaching issues. And that to me jumps off screen. When you watch them, they've been in close games where they really botched. That's to me the biggest thing. The biggest thing is always the eye test to me. I'm sorry. You can back up all the stats you want. When you watch Florida, to me of late, under the Napier era, is they've shot themselves in the foot, and they actually, frankly, got very fortunate in the South Florida and the first Utah game. They probably should have lost those games, to win those games. But
I know we're kind of all over the place here, but I love Benedict Dantold's idea of selling SGPN lawn chairs in the merch store.
that is a great idea.
Just a big quarterback's face on it. Graham Mertz's face.
That's a great fucking idea.
Should we focus on the offense here?
Yes, the offense. They returned 7 starters on the offensive side of the ball. Graham Mertz. How long's the leash? You got to wonder with the quarterback Lagway coming in. Running back is interesting because Etienne transfers out to Georgia, but Montrell Johnson did get some starts, and Montrell Johnson followed him from Louisiana over. He was the leading
rusher last year, within 60 yards of Etienne, but they're kind of a two-headed attack there. But Montrell Johnson was the leader, so they get the leading passer and rusher back.
I think they're average. I think Montrell Johnson and Trayvon Webb are they're kind of like Mertz. I think they're solid. They're not game breakers. They're not gonna, make a big play. They're just solid players.
Wideouts Eugene Wilson III and Khalil Jackson are back.
Now Trey Wilson he was a freshman last year. That dude, especially with Pearsall gone, he might be in for a big year.
Well, I don't get a brain, man.
They returned 3 on the offensive line, and don't forget about the kicker. One of my favorite names, Trey Smack. Sounds like a rapper in Florida. Don't be fucking with Trey Smack. All right. But anyway, Florida's offense, they returned that, and in the portal they brought in Hugh Millen. Do I mention Hugh Millen? Former New England Patriot and Denver Broncos starting quarterback. Well, I don't know about on the Broncos, but on the Patriots he started. All right. Hugh Millen, his son was at Colorado State, was running the air raid there, transfers out to Florida. Nice gets, a little quarterback depth. And this one's huge. Elijah Badger. This guy was a baller at Arizona State. So that's a very nice get for them. Also, Tremere Dyke from Wisconsin.
DK. He's reunited with Graham Mertz.
I like to say Dyke. But Dyke comes in and, he's back with Mertz and Badger. Like the receiving core, getting Badger and Dyke, I think really kind of boost the receiving core here.
To go along with Wilson. Sorry, Patty, go ahead.
I was going to say our lads has both of those, DK and Badger, listed as starters to go along with Wilson.
I think that's a really good 3 wide receivers. I think the strong suit of the offense is the receiver group.
Well, then tight end Caleb Relos comes in from Air Force. Holy fuck! Air Force takes a transfer, or you can transfer out of Air Force. The offensive line, big issue of late, but they brought in Brandon Crenshaw from San Diego State, Devin Manuel from Arkansas, and Jason Zandamela from USC. I mean, we'll see. I don't know, but I can tell you this: they lost Max Brown to Charlotte. Max Brown got a start for them, and if I was Patty C, I would cringe when Max Brown's going to throw for a good 300 against those JMU Dukes.
Well, here's the other thing too, and we haven't gone to transfers leaving, but you had starting linemen transfer to Florida State, to Nebraska. You had your running back go to Georgia. Again, usually like the top-notch teams, you don't lose starters to transfer. You lose depth. You lose backups to transferring out. Florida lost, and they also lost some guys on defense, some starters. So some big losses in the portal here.
Yes, Micah Mukuza is who's he referring to. He goes out to Nebraska. Max Brown goes to Charlotte, quarterback depth, but they answered that. Etienne to Georgia. Carlos Joseph, another running back in the portal. Caleb Douglas goes to Texas Tech at a wideout spot. Ty Brown also in the portal. Tight end Andrew Savanaugh heads to Jeff Choate in Nevada, the Wolfpack. And then the offensive line, like I said, Jalen Farmer to Kentucky. Mazkua to Nebraska. Jordan Herman to Charlotte. When Biff Poggi's coming in and just taking away your roster, you better be fucking worried. Richie Leonard, though, heads out to Florida State. And hold on. I'm sorry, guys. I'm supposed to be optimistic about
a guy to Georgia and a guy to Florida State.
I'm supposed to be optimistic about college football in 2024. And the youth is going to leave me a 1-star review saying that, they're going to probably call me a boomer, even though I'm not.
Get that bag.
Yeah. How fucking ridiculous. Where the fuck? You fucking losers. You're a loser, Richie Leonard. I'm sorry. Like, what are you doing? Go transfer anywhere else. Trevor Etienne, fuck you too. All right. Your brother played. Why don't you just go to Clemson? Why don't you just go to Clemson from the start?
There's nothing sacred.
Fucking losers. You're losers. All right,
guys. So overall, this offense, is this offense going to make big strides from last year? Probably not.
Maybe the receiving core, you could argue, maybe better.
But I mean, Pearsall's a big loss, but I think they're definitely deeper this year.
I don't know if the offensive line's better though. And here's another thing: there's no SEC East. You're playing SEC West teams. You're playing your Texas and Oklahoma are in the conference now.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be hard for Mertz to generate much better stats, unless they're throwing the ball around a lot more. They seem to have a balanced attack, but 20 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. I will say having him as a second-year starter in the system probably helps the offense run more smoothly.
Sure.
So yeah, there's some potential there. And if the defense is able to help out and, they're able to be on the winning side of some of those close games, then, maybe they're not in some tough spots. I don't know. That's often the case when you're playing from behind. You don't generate quite as, you're not playing in an advantageous position. And so you have to throw the ball. Sometimes you become a little more predictable. So maybe if they're winning some of these games, the offense looks better.
And I also wonder, like, I know it could be NIL driven after the Rashada thing, but I also wonder if some of those starters that left for better schools or other big time programs, I wonder if it had to do with the fact I think Napier will be fired by game 4.
Maybe they looked at their schedule and was like, shit, we might not even go bowling this year.
Yeah.
Maybe that's why you want to go to Georgia or Florida State.
Yeah. Well, Georgia's also beat them by like more than 3 touchdowns the past 2 games. So let's talk about the defense. They were 75th in scoring defense a season ago.
That's awful.
Yeah. That's just not what they're supposed to do. Now I know they have co-defense. That was one of the more hilarious things. They had that DC. God, I should have pulled that clip for this. Now that I think about it. They had the guy that looked like the great Hambino from Sandlot talking about all the great ways their defense is going to be legit. He's like, we can run 3-4, we can run 4-3, we can come at you. I got everything covered. And then it's like, no, you're getting destroyed week in, week out. But Austin Armstrong, they went out and hired also Ron Roberts. He was at Baylor, he was at Auburn. So they got co-DCs and they have co-OCs too, which is kind of a new thing too. But anyway, 75th in scoring per game, 27.6 points per game. That was 11th in the SEC. 79th in rush defense. That was also 11th in the SEC. 70th in pass defense, 226.7 yards per game. That's 9th best in the SEC. And 11th in total defense as far as yards. 69th in the nation, 11th in the SEC. 382.2 yards per game. So I think we could say that, I know we talk shit about the offense, but I feel like the defense is clearly worse than the offense, Nick, right?
Let me add 2 more stats to that. They were also 12th in the SEC in sacks. And get this, they forced 7 turnovers on the entire season. 129th in the nation in turnovers forced. Talk about not helping out your offense. Give them a short field every once in a bit. Get in there, get a couple sacks. Interceptions, fumbles. I mean, come on. The defense has to play much better if they're going to save Napier's job.
And I'm guessing they got those turnovers against Charlotte and McNeese. So, yeah.
Seven on the whole year. That's ridiculous.
That ain't going to do it. Do we know how much of their returning, I guess, production on defense?
Yes, right there, buddy. And I threw the punter in there too. 6 returning starters on the defensive side of the ball. The defensive line actually seems that I know New King God is talking about. They have no proven pass rushers on the defensive side of the ball, but I can tell you this: at least they get some depth, some experience on the defensive line with Tyreek Sapp, Cam Jackson, and Caleb Banks coming back. The question I think is the linebacking core, the secondary, but yeah, you do bring up a good point, New King God, as far as like sacks. Are they getting at the quarterback with those guys, even with their experience?
The one guy who got sacks transferred out, and I think it's probably on the next slide, and I can't wait for you to try to pronounce his name, Colby.
Fantastic. Good thing I had a whiskey or two before the episode. So they bring back linebacker Shamar James, who's very good. Now, I will say they did bring in Pup Howard from South Carolina. What are you doing? Cornerback Jason Marshall Jr. is back. He played well for them last season. Free safety Jordan Castell is back. Punter Jeremy Crawshaw is back. So, yes, what they lost in the portal, or no, this is what they gained in the portal. I put that first because they did get Cormani McClain from Colorado, which is the big one that Dion essentially kind of kicked out of Colorado. But big time recruit, but it was interesting how that unfolded. Defensive lineman Joey Slackman comes in from Penn. When you're going, look,
he's supposed to be a good recruit or a good transfer.
Hey, I mean, you're in the Ivy League. It's weird that the SEC's watching tape of the Ivy League. I can dig it, but because I watch those games, but it'll be interesting to see how that works out. George Gums comes in from Northern Illinois. Thomas Hammock's bunch. Linebacker Grayson Howard from South Carolina. That's Pup Howard. He's a stud. We know that. Jameer Grimsley comes in from Alabama at the cornerback spot. DJ Douglas, a safety from Tulane, comes in. Trickwezi Bridges from Oregon. And then the big one here, Asa Turner, who actually is penciled in to be a day one starter from Washington, played in the national championship game. That is one that to me, okay, that raises the eyebrow. What they lost is what NC Nick's referring to. Defensive end Prince Milan.
So he led the team in sacks last year. I think he had 7 or 8 or so. So that's a big loss.
Yes, and he heads out to, of all places, their next head coach, Lane Kiffin. Oh, did I already say that? I feel like Lane Kiffin's the next Florida head coach, but
he very well could be.
I'm fairly certain he's the next Florida head coach. Make sure to leave a tip, folks, when this nails. But he goes to Ole Miss of all places. If Ole Miss is stealing the best defensive player from Florida,
times have changed.
It's a new day and age in college football. Chris McKellen goes to Missouri, also in the SEC.
A pretty big loss too.
Yeah, defensive lineman Will Norman heads out to Marshall. Also, Keenan Landry on the D line heads to La Tech. Linebacker Scooby Williams going to Texas A&M. I'm sure Mike Elko will have him be a first-round draft pick.
He was Manny Nunnery tackler last year.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. Manny Nunnery hits the portal. Jaden Hill also heads out to A&M with Elko. Defensive backs, they got blasted too. Miguel Mitchell goes to Arkansas. Kamari Wilson to Arizona State. Jalen Kimber to Penn State. Jadarius Perkins to Toledo. And even their backup kicker, Adam
Mihalik.
Oh, there you go. No. I was gonna go way off the reservation on that one.
I think Patty nailed it.
Yeah. He's gone. And yeah, I mean, what do you guys think in general of
the defense? What do you think?
The defense. I think they're gonna be terrible, but
I think the secondary is gonna be fine. I think they're bringing in enough talent on the secondary. I think New King God nailed it. I think the interior defensive line will be solid. Maybe their run defense can be a little bit better because of that. But where are the pass rushers? And you have an unproven DC.
That's true.
And like the Cormani McClain he's super talented, but I do worry about to me, this dude was not showing up to class, which I mean, I know that's a normal in the SEC, but so you wonder where your head's at, and you wonder like where the whole team's head will be at when Billy Napier gets fired by week 5. So it's look, if you're watching youtube.com/the college experience, you see the win total sitting there at 4.5 wins. I don't know how, like, you might be like, hey, let's take if you go through the schedule, 5-7, 6-6 possible. I don't know how you're ever confidently saying that with the uncertainty at the head coaching and the potential quit in this team.
And we got to talk about the juice, the overs -150. So you got all that uncertainty about this season, and you're also laying a ton of juice to go with an over. Meanwhile, the under is at +130. Now, let's go back 2 or 3 years. Did we ever think we would see Florida with a win total at 4.5? I mean, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, that is not something I would expect to see probably any time in my lifetime. Based on where they were when we were coming up in the 90s, they looked like a team that was bound to stay on top forever. I guess every team can have, rough patches, but man, 4 wins for Florida.
They did have two 4-win seasons in the past decade, so maybe we should be accustomed to that.
We're about to go schedule by schedule here, but like Colby mentioned earlier, this is the hardest schedule in all the nation. It's one of the hardest schedules that we can remember in recent years. Why are you doing this to a coach who needs, he needs to gain traction? Give him an easy schedule. Let him get to 7-5. Let him build.
But some of this is you leaving the SEC East. Florida voted yes on bringing in Texas and Oklahoma. Okay, I know both aren't on the schedule, but you know who
isn't on the schedule? Vandy, South Carolina.
That's what I'm saying. Well, with going to that many teams, you had to figure there'd be no SEC East, right? So. And if not, then you should fire whoever's in charge, because when you get 16 teams, you can't have that many teams going to the West. What are you just hoping that Auburn and Alabama end up in the East? There's no logic to this. You had to know that there was going to be a big time shakeup with that. And you voted yes on this. And
but what's in your control is out of conference.
Yes.
And
well,
they're insane compared to look at Missouri's out of conference. Look at Georgia's out of conference other than Clemson. Look at other teams in the SEC. They're out of conference. And then you say, Florida, what the hell are you doing?
Fair for this year. But,
yes.
But a few years ago, they did have 2 FCSs. So, I mean, I don't know what they were thinking with this year and trying to jam pack all of it into this year, because you play Florida State every year.
All of their in-state rivals.
Yes. And
is it a fair question to say, do they want to get rid of Napier? Are they setting him up for failure with this schedule?
I would have to know when they scheduled the UCF game, because the year before Scott Frost came there, UCF was 0-12. So if they scheduled it saying this will be a layup,
well, you can always buy yourself out of it like every other team does.
Yeah, unless UCF says, "Hey, we're in the Big 12 now. We don't need your money."
There's no way they scheduled this thinking that this was. Is this the 2-for-1 thing that UCF ended up agreeing upon? I know that there was that, obviously, the email situation, and them basically saying, "Hey, we're not going 1-for-1 with them." But I think they eventually took a 2-for-1, right? And
yes, but when was that? That was that Frost era or something, right? I feel like that was somewhere right around there.
Yeah.
Either way, to have 3 Power 4 opponents, and granted, to your guys' point, UCF wasn't always Power 4. 2 years ago, they weren't in a power conference. But to have 3 Power 4 opponents is crazy. And the cool thing, though, the fun thing, being an outsider, not a Florida fan, is that they're all Florida schools. So we love regionality. There's a bunch of games here that are going to be fun. So I can't wait to watch.
100%, folks. Look, before we dive into the schedule, I want you to know out there that this is the College Football Experience, part of the Sports Gambling Podcast Network, and the NBA Finals are here. So what are you doing? Check out Underdog Fantasy. The NBA playoffs are here, and our sponsor, Underdog Fantasy, wants to make it a lot more interesting for you. Underdog Fantasy is the easiest place to play fantasy sports. Playing their pick'em games is simple as selecting higher or lower on player stats like points, rebounds, assists, and much, much more. You can make entries of all basketball, or you can mix and match across your favorite sports. You can win up to 100 times the amount of money you enter, and it's a ton of fun. Underdog's available in 30 plus different states, including California and Texas, and even in the great country of Canada. And look, Florida, you might be saying, man, they took our props from us. Who are these politicians taking our prop betting away from us? Don't worry. Underdog Fantasy, they launched their champions, their player versus player format designed specifically for the great state of Florida. So what are you doing? Sign up now and sign up with the promo code TCESGPN to claim your special pick plus first time deposit offer up to $250 in bonus cash. UnderdogFantasy.com, promo code TCESGPN. All right, we are back on the college football experience, and Gator. The win total is at 4.5 wins. It is juiced towards the over. To win the SEC championship, it's plus 1,300. They don't even have odds to make the 12-team playoff, which I find crazy. This is Florida. There's no odds out there to make the fucking playoffs. To win the national championship, they are plus 25,000. Isn't that wild?
That'd be a nice turnaround.
I'm just saying, no, to make the 12-team playoff, you would assume with Florida. Strange. Yeah.
Well, let me ask you this. Given that they played a lot of these teams pretty decently, I know, I mean, if we look at the scores from last year again, only lost to a 11-2 Missouri team by what? I got 2 points, I believe. Lost to Georgia by 23, but I feel like that game was a little closer than that.
No, that was
an ass kicking through all the way through. I mean, the Florida State game was close till the end. Look, I thought if you got a guy like Lagway, say he steps in and just blows the doors off the place, then this team should have a playoff ceiling. You know, it's not like they were that far behind, you know, other playoff caliber teams. I mean, LSU last year was a playoff caliber team. Granted, they lost by 17, but I don't think Florida is completely out of the question if they get, you know, some improvement.
When's the last time like a freshman quarterback did that? Was like Caleb Williams, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know that it's super infrequent. Johnny Manziel. I mean, Michael Vick, obviously
in his freshman year. I just think it's hard to ask. I mean, first off, I don't think Lagway comes in unless, you know, Florida drops a couple games to start the season. And then what do you have left? I mean,
is there an example of I guess Tyrod Taylor came in for Sean Glennon, but yeah, they had dropped a game early on LSU or whatever. But I do think sometimes Caleb Williams, like Oklahoma wasn't losing when Caleb Williams took over they were just losing in the first half of that game. And then Spencer Rattler was taken out. So if they're struggling early on in a game and Lagway comes in and dominates, then he can see the field early and they still won't have taken a loss.
I would say the difference is that Oklahoma was still like kind of the main show in the Big 12. Like they were great at every other position, or not great, but good at every other position.
Better than most of the teams they were playing.
Yeah, like Florida does not have that luxury. Right. You know what I mean?
Well, I think Florida could very well be 7-0.
Let's jump into the schedule one game at a time.
Yeah,
I would be pretty shocked at that, but
me too.
I would too, but it's possible.
Sure, theoretically, they could go 12-0. Miami is the first opponent, and look, Miami has went out and bought a roster. Make no mistakes about it. I just did an Ohio State pod, and they're like, "Yeah, the Miami bought Cam Ward of Ohio State. Ohio State wanted him." Okay, John Ruiz saying, "Fuck you, we're going for it." Look, I'm not a Mario Cristobal fan. It's at the Swamp. I think this is very winnable for Florida.
I think Florida's going to win.
I think they could, certainly. I think, well, look, I'll be honest. Both coaches need to prove it to me. But I think Miami's got the more talented roster. But, I mean, with it being in the Swamp, it's a true 50-50 game to me. If anything, I would probably favor Florida by 1 or 2.
It's still the Gators. It's still the Swamp. And, look, you know, Miami brought in all these players, but it's game one also. That helps Florida here. Florida has a little bit more continuity on their roster than Miami does at this point. I don't know, man. Everybody's talking about Miami, and you know, maybe our guy in the chat, New King God's gonna, you know, turn us off now. But I just think Florida at home certainly might win this game.
I think it's more of a 50-50 game though, because
Of course it is.
Miami's roster is so much better than Florida's when you just saw paper.
It's not a shoe-in at all. No, definitely not. I think Miami's favored by 2 is what I saw about a week ago. So Vegas thinks it's going to be a very close game. So do I. I wouldn't be surprised if this is almost like the Utah game 2 years ago, where Florida pulls it out at home week 1.
Oh yeah, this could be a good game.
And if you're wondering on the right, I power rank to me the toughest games on the schedule, starting at 1 all the way to 12. That's just my power rankings. That's not Nick and Patty C's, but
I think it looks about right.
I'll even meet you in the middle. Let's say Florida gets this win. Let's say, because I believe they could. Patty C, you think they could?
I believe they could. Real quick, both teams played Florida State, a common opponent, within a 3-week period. Miami had to go on the road, and they lost by 7 against Florida State. Florida was hosting Florida State, and they lost by 9. That suggests Miami was slightly better. But
Miami, I feel like Miami was better than Florida last year. But
yeah, I think it's going to be a really good game. But I think the Swamp gives them an edge. I don't know. If you flip a coin in that game.
Let's just say, hear me out. Florida's 1-0.
Yeah.
They get Samford, who did score like 52 on them the last time they played. They run the air raid there, but I'm sure they'll be fine. 2-0. They get Samford, right? I do not think they've beaten. I'm kind of high on Texas A&M. I think Mike Elko is one of the best coaches in college football, and I do not see them beating Texas A&M. I don't care if it's at the Swamp. I don't care if it's on the fucking moon. I think Texas A&M is way better from a talent perspective right now. You can tell by a couple of the guys he recruited from Florida's roster, but also I just think he's a way better football coach than Billy Napier. And I see this as an unwinnable game for Florida.
I would certainly say that Florida's not good enough to expect wins over Miami and A&M at home the week, within the first 3 weeks. So I will also agree with you and give this game to A&M, and Florida's 2-1.
Yeah, I'll agree with that line of reasoning. Although I think I'm not as high as Colby is on A&M. I mean, I agree that Mike Elko is proven to be a plumber.
Well, the irony here is that A&M's had like the best recruiting classes here, and Patty C always argues the best recruiting.
Well,
so you have a proven coach that, to me,
let me use Colby's reasoning is that they never get it done. So we're going to use each other's reasoning against each other.
But Mike Elko, one of the things I think about as a leg up on a lot of the other new coaches is he's familiar with a lot of this roster because 2 years ago he was their defensive coordinator. I think they're going to hit the ground running. I think they're going to beat Notre Dame, and I think Texas A&M is a legit playoff contender this year. I don't see them winning this game. I just
either
think
way, we'll give them 2-1.
2-1. Then they head to Stark Vegas to take on Jeff Lebby in Mississippi State. Now this is a very winnable game because I got no fucking idea. They bring in Blake Shape and transfers into Mississippi State to run the quarterback spot. Will Rogers is now at Washington. I have no idea what to expect at Mississippi State. I'm going to say Florida's better than Mississippi State. I'm going to say
I think so.
Yeah.
I think other than Vanderbilt, Mississippi State's the worst team in the SEC. I think Florida.
But Stark Vegas with the cowbells back there.
Not an easy place to win.
Yeah, it wouldn't shock me the way that Napier's coached, but I got to favor Florida in this one.
Yeah,
I would too. Does Napier's history with Louisiana going 7-7 year 1 and then 11-3 in year 2? Now he's going 6-7, 5-7. Maybe it'll take year 3 for there to be a jump at Florida. But
I just think it's hard to compare Florida and Louisiana.
Well, especially with how bad the Sun Belt West was.
Yeah.
It was the easiest division in football. And if anything, there's no SEC East. He should have done it his first 2 years. Now you're getting to the fucking full.
Now
you're the same as everybody. Yeah. You got a bye week on the 28th, and then you're home to UCF and Gus Malzahn on October 5th. Look, I think UCF's roster is better. I'm kind of bullish on what Gus Malzahn brought in. Now that is at the Swamp, so I could see Florida winning this game. But I also think UCF has the motivational edge here. I think they know that, hey, this is the big bad SEC. We get to come in here and play. And to me, they have the more talented roster. KJ Jefferson's better than Graham Mertz to me. A lot of the roster. RJ Harvey's a fucking stud. The running back for UCF. They got guys to me that jump off screen to me. Florida hasn't had that in a little bit.
Well, Jefferson won in the swamp last year.
Yeah, well, he's a much better quarterback than Graham Mertz. I don't give a shit who's selling me this.
What about Napier versus Malzahn?
Malzahn's got a huge edge. That's what I'm saying. Like, I have to take UCF here. Is it possible that Florida wins this game? 100%, because it's at the Swamp and that's such a great home field advantage. But I almost think UCF will come in with more of the chip on their shoulder, which is an advantage to them. I'm taking UCF to win this game, guys.
Not to get ahead of ourselves, but in the next, 2 other games that followed UCF, they have 2 home games, UCF and Kentucky. I think Florida gets one of those 2.
Like, I don't think I think a lot of the stuff with like Malzahn, like you look at what UCF had to like, you look at UCF's season last year and you say, okay, they were 6-7, made a bowl, lost to Georgia Tech. But if you actually dive into the season, Rice Plumlee gets dinged up. They had a 1-point loss to Baylor where they blew like a 35-3 lead, right? A 2-point loss at Oklahoma, a 1-point loss to Texas Tech. I think this team is way better than their record last year.
I
would agree with you, Colby. I think UCF, I kind of like them this year, and I don't see Florida beating both of the other Miami schools out of conference at home. So I'm going to agree with you. I'm going to say UCF wins this. Sorry, Patty, go ahead.
Or both of the other Florida schools, you were saying?
Yeah, you said Miami.
Yeah. Miami, UCF, and Florida State. You think they go what?
2-1? Well, no, I think they're going to lose at Florida State at the end of the year. But I think their 2 home games, Miami and UCF, they probably split those. They beat Miami, they lose to UCF.
Yeah. Did you guys? I mean, we saw, Oklahoma State was what, a 10-win team a year ago. Played in the Big 12 championship. UCF beat them 45-3. That's what I'm saying. Like, I think this team is a lot closer to top Big 12 contention, especially when you add in what UCF brought in the portal. I think
they were just inconsistent.
I think some of that was the throwing arm of Mackenzie Milton. I think KJ Jefferson is just a way better quarterback.
Well, how many games was Milton starting and how many was Plumlee?
Not Mackenzie Milton. Yeah. John Rice Plumlee.
Yeah. Mackenzie Milton went where? I don't know.
No, he's gone. He's done. He's graduated. He went to Florida State and then graduated. But
that's right. Plumlee was dinged up too. So I think they have a way better quarterback situation now.
The roster, they brought in Penny Boone from it was a running via Louisville and Ole Miss. He bounced around. They got him. Ja'Cory Brown comes in, the quarterback, so they have some quarterback depth from Miami. They went out to USC, brought in Traquan Fagans at the defensive back spot, Cedric Hawkins from Ohio State. Like, we're going to get to this on the UCF preview, but they went out and brought in Bama guys and Texas guys and Auburn guys. Like, I feel like their roster is better than Florida's right now. I'm taking UCF to win that game.
Yeah, I agree. So I have Florida at 3-2 going into a big game at Tennessee. Colby, you're right with me at 3-2?
Yes.
Patty C, where you at?
I am. I'm with you there. Yeah.
What, Tennessee?
This is a huge game because I think if Florida loses, I think Napier might be fired.
Well, they're losing.
I think
they're not going to go to Rocky Top and win that game. I think they would wait to the bye to fire him, the second bye. But I got them 3-3. I think they lose to Tennessee.
I agree.
Yep.
Patty?
Yep. Right there with you guys. I mean, it might be 3.5 wins in my head right now, just because, Sanford's definitely a win. I think on the road at Mississippi State is most likely a win. And then Miami, Texas A&M, and UCF all at home. There's a 1.5 in there. I think they kind of split that.
But hold on. Like, I think they're the worst roster out of those 4. Now, Grant, you're right. They're in the swamp. But if you went roster by roster, you can't tell me that you think, I mean, maybe I guess you could push UCF, but they're certainly not a better roster than Miami and Texas A&M.
I think it's close with Miami and A&M.
I disagree.
You are way higher on A&M.
They had one guy drafted last year, dude.
They were trash last year. They weren't a good team last year, and so maybe I think 3-2 may be where you put them after 5 games. But
also, Patty, just looking at the transfer portal, I wouldn't say they like convincingly won the portal. They had a lot of guys depart who played, they saw a lot of the field. So I don't see them making a huge jump, roster wise or talent wise. I know they had a good recruiting class, but most freshmen in college football aren't ready to produce and be that valuable. I don't know.
Field,
So
I mean, I don't think Miami was anything special, but I guess you have to say Cam Ward and Damian
Martinez. But
Martinez.
no, they brought in everybody, man.
They brought in a lot. I mean, but Miami's always supposed to be that good, and I guess
that's why I can understand that one, because like Cristobal is a shitty coach in my opinion. So it's like I could see that happening. Malzahn and Elko, I think, have a leg up from the coaching front and the roster front. I don't think they can win those games.
Yeah. They're no worse. They're going to have 2 losses by the Tennessee game for sure. Probably 3. So we'll say they're 3-3 there.
After Tennessee, we're all at 3-3. I have them beating Kentucky in the next game at home to go to 4-3.
Not me. I think it's the one that gets them fired. Kentucky's had their number lately.
I know Kentucky's won 3 in a row.
And even with that, the one they lost 4 games ago, Kentucky blew like a 17-point fourth quarter lead against, and they knocked out what's his name, and Kyle Trask came in, Felipe Franks. So it was like they needed everything to go right. I know that was in Lexington, but I think Kentucky's better than Florida. I'm taking Kentucky. I think it's a game that gets Napier fired. I think he's fired on October 26th.
Right before the Georgia game.
Yep.
Did you wait? So you have them winning that Miami game to open the season, though?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So that's your one of their 4 home games against maybe comparable teams. I mean, do you think Kentucky is a better team than Florida this year?
I do. I think they're a better coach team, and I think they match them physically, and I also think to me they've proven it over the past 5 years under Stoops. They have their number. They're fucking them up, and you know what it is? Also, is it's depleting to Florida. Florida doesn't honor this as a rivalry game, but Kentucky does. Kentucky gets up for this game each and every fucking year. It's on their calendar, whether Florida's with Werfel era or not. Stoops has put this in their DNA. I don't think they're winning this game.
So you have 3 home losses in the swamp before November hits. Well, if that is the case, then yes, they're going to fire Napier, because Florida is not used to losing that many home games.
He might get fired before that. If this lawsuit, he might not even coach a game this year. You realize that?
Well, we might have to revisit this.
Well, that's the gamble on taking the over, is he might get fired before this.
There's no way you bet the over, especially at that minus 150. There's just no way you can do it. You either bet the under or you just hit this one out.
It's 4.5 is the number.
Yeah.
I don't see it.
So I have them, beating Kentucky, I suppose, as long as the coaching is still intact. But then that's probably their last win of the season, because, like Joe Hackney said in the chat, their last 5 games are fucking ridiculous.
Yeah.
After the bye week on the 26th, that I suspect Napier will be fired at. And hang on, before we go into the final stretch of the season, I want to tell you that the College Football Experience is brought to you by Rhythm. If you're betting on NBA player props, then you need to download Rhythm. Rhythm gives you a menu of best player props for every single NBA playoff game, making it easier to go through and find the best props to put your money on in a matter of seconds. Rhythm's predictions are backed by over 3 years of data and a team full of data scientists and quants that focus on fine-tuning their algorithm to give you the best shot at winning. From superstars to bench players, Rhythm finds the best player prop lines for you, all backed by AI data without you needing to endlessly scroll through some sports book. So what are you doing? Claim your free 7-day trial today by going to sportsgamblingpodcast.com/rhythm. That's RITHMM. Once again, that's sportsgamblingpodcast.com/rhythm. Okay, we're back talking Gator football here. After the bye week, going into the Halloween weekend there, they get the world's biggest cocktail party in Jacksonville against Georgia. That's not going to win. That's not going to be a win on the schedule. That will be another 3-touchdown loss, in my opinion. And
the last 3 games, 22-point win, 23-point win, 27-point win for Georgia.
Yeah. They're not winning that game, and so I got them still sitting there at
3 and
5, I think, right?
Yeah.
You guys got them at 4 and 4, but good luck. And then you head to Austin.
Nope.
3-6. Then you come home to Brian Kelly and his family. Now I'll say this: these games are always insane.
Yeah.
They could get LSU or Ole Miss at home.
That's what I'm saying.
They definitely could.
I'll say this: if Napier's still there, they'll get one of them. Now, if they fired him, I think the whole team quits. I think they lose out. If Napier's still there, I think they get LSU or Ole Miss. Not both, though. I think that they go 1-1 in that stretch.
And that puts him at 4 wins in your book. For Nick and I, that would put him on the over.
Yeah. But
my final record is 4-8. It's on the under. They lose all 5 of those. I'm saying, could they beat LSU or Ole Miss? Definitely, but I don't see it happening.
Then you have the season finale when the Gators go to the library, take on the Florida State Seminoles, and you don't just walk into the library without your spy novel. But there's no way they win this, right? There's no way this year.
There's a chance that their last 5 opponents are all top 10 teams. And if they're not top 10 teams, they're probably all at least top 20 to top 25 teams.
Well, if you mix that with Tennessee and Texas A&M, and perhaps if Miami lives up to the hype, and there's a chance UCF wins the goddamn Big 12. Look, I think this is like I said, I think they're going 4, and I'll take them at 4-8.
I like it.
And shout out to Benedict Dantold in the chat, says the alt line for under 3.5 wins is plus 300. It is worth a shot, because I can tell you this: if they lose to Miami out the gate, that's the biggest game on the schedule to me, because it dictates the future of your season.
Yeah.
If they lose to Miami and then they lose to A&M and they're 1-2, I think they lose in Starkville, and that's when I think he's fired. So it's worth a shot at under 3.5 wins at plus 300.
Really the only 2 gimmies, and Stanford is the one gimme. Then we're saying at Mississippi State's a gimme, which I mean, I think Florida's 70-30. They're going to win that. But at Starkville should never really be a gimme for just an average team. And that, hey, face it, that's what Florida is right now. So and things could unravel quickly.
Yeah. So
I'm not as confident in it that it's a lock for the under, but I would lean under as well.
Even though you went through it and you were on the over, right? You guys were on the over.
No, I was not on the over.
Oh, okay.
4-8.
I think 4-8 is probably about right, but I think it all depends on, if this team is considerably stronger than they have been, which, who knows until that happens. But I think that potential is there. I just think, it's kind of wait and see. And if you're just going with the information you have, then I'm going to lean under.
Can you imagine if how many SEC teams get in the playoff? Could it be 4 this year?
Yes, it definitely could be 4.
Can you imagine if it's LSU, Texas, Georgia, and Tennessee or A&M, right? Imagine those are the 4. And imagine this.
Florida State gets in.
Florida State gets in and UCF get in. You could be playing. I mean, and
what if Miami gets in also?
That's what I'm saying. You could have. That'd be insane.
They're playing more than half of the college football playoffs.
Yeah, unbelievable. But look, you invented Gatorade. I'll give you if you know what, if that happens, then I'll give you full credit for inventing Gatorade. Yeah, I mean, I feel pretty good about the under.
Let me ask you this, guys: Is college football better with a good Florida squad?
Of course. I feel like Florida in general, Florida State rivalry, when they're both like top 25, they don't need to be top 10 to me, because I remember like hating those teams in the 90s.
Yeah,
but
I hated it. But it was awesome when they were going at it like in both number 1, 2, 3.
Who'd you hate more, the Spurrier teams or the
Bowden teams or the
the
Meyer Davis?
The Meyer teams.
Meyer.
I hated the Meyer teams. I hated the Meyer teams most.
Yeah. Because you knew they were just getting away with everything, and like Urban Meyer is Urban Meyer, man.
Well, I feel like we didn't really know that until afterwards.
There is still something very. I mean, Tim Tebow annoyed the living crap out of me while he was in college. Everyone else loved him. I hated his ass. Look, as far as 90s Florida or Florida State, I hated Florida most of the time more, but I will say when they had Fred Taylor and Danny Werfel in 96, I was pulling for the Gators. I thought they were a pretty badass team that year. So glad they got the better of them at least once. But my ACC pride is always going to have me rooting for the Noles in that one.
Well, let me ask you this: between Miami, Florida, and Florida State, if you want, like, if one of them was going to get a national championship next year or the year after, who would you prefer it to be?
At this point, Miami, because they're the only one that's going to be in the ACC.
Exactly. Like, right now, like, you can't really root for Florida State since they're trying to leave the ACC. Florida's already got that kind of recently. I would say Miami also.
I think you're right. I think I'm on board. That's crazy because I would have never thought I'd be rooting for that. But folks, we are the College Football Experience. We're breaking down every single team in the land. All right. We just did an Arkansas preview earlier today. Go check that out. We did Alabama. That's out there. Auburn's coming out later tonight. You got all that stuff going on. Check it all out. And obviously throughout the week, we're going to tackle the rest of the SEC. So buckle up. We're just getting started. Go all 134 teams are previewing on the College Football Experience. We do this each and every year. iTunes, Spotify, wherever podcasts can be found. Hop on over to YouTube, youtube.com/the College Experience. Hit that like and subscribe button. Also, make sure you check out all of our other feeds. College baseball is going along right now. It's kicking ass right now. Check out the College Baseball Experience, part of our YouTube channel. If you subscribe to our YouTube channel, you get all of our stuff. But from podcast sake, check out the College Baseball Experience. The season's awesome right now. Some of the games have been phenomenal. The Gators, like I said, just took down Oklahoma State. So jump on over there. Check out that. Also, I host the FCS College Football Experience. Maybe you are a Samford fan. Maybe you're a Florida A&M Rattler fan. All right. Check out the FCS College Football Experience. Also, the College Basketball Experience. All right. Billy Donovan had Florida rolling. Can they get back there? Can Todd Golden get them back there? We talk college hoops year round over there as well. Once again, we all come together as one on the same channel for YouTube. But also we have the Stadium Heads podcast. Myself and you might have heard about this guy, Michael Barker, aka College Football Campus Tour, who goes to over 90 games each and every year. Well, me and him break down why college football is the greatest fucking thing to ever hit planet Earth. And we go through the history of all the stadiums.
Can I interrupt and say that's a great podcast? And also the first couple ones I listened to audio, but then the last one today I listened to on YouTube. It's so much better watching it because you can see all the pictures and everything. I highly recommend it.
Yes, and that is one that the visual this one too, but the visual side is always going to be better.
I mean, our pretty faces, you know.
Yeah, especially, you get that. Also check out all the other stuff we got going. Sports Gambling Podcast. We're interviewing June Jones tomorrow. You might dig that one. And there's a bunch of other pods out there. CFL Gambling Podcast, UFL Gambling Podcast. If football is not your cup of tea, the Golf Gambling Podcast. There's just a bunch of them. Go check them all out. You subscribe to the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. You'll get all of them. There's an SGPN app for free to download in the App Store and Google Play Store. You'll get all of our content, written articles about college football, college basketball, whatever your cup of tea is. Check it all out. Folks, until next time, make sure you give Patty C a follow on Twitter, PattyC831, NC Nicks on Twitter at NC_NICK.
Double underscore.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. __. So NC__NICK. I'm on Twitter at @TheColbyD. The College Football Experience is on Twitter at TCE on SGPN. Until next time, folks, this is the College Football Experience. Gator, Gator, Gator. You better start thinking about yours. And we out of here.